Okay, so somehow I get the feeling that you want me to cover Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. So far in the version differences series, we've covered generations 1, 2, and 3. So of course, next up is the Sinnoh games, being Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. We'll be starting off by comparing Diamond and Pearl to each other, and then seeing what's new in Platinum. We'll start with Diamond and Pearl's intros, except the main intros are identical in each version, with the only difference being a silhouette of Dialga or Palkia being shown at the title screen. But let's get on with version-exclusive Pokemon. Diamond has the Seel, Scyther, Murkrow, Larvitar, Poochyena, Aron, Cranidos and Stunky lines, as well as Kecleon and Dialga, whereas Pearl has the Slowpoke, Misdreavus, Houndour, Spheal, Bagon, Shieldon and Glameow lines, as well as Pinsir, Stantler, and Palkia. An image of Dialga can be seen in Celestic Town in Pearl to count for the Pokedex, while the same is true for Diamond with Palkia. There are also a few instances of Pokemon having different encounter rates in each version, or some Pokemon of an evolution line being version exclusive. For example, Silcoon and Beautifly can only be found in the wild in Diamond, while Cascoon and Dustox can only be found in the wild in Pearl. Well, Beautifly can be found on Route 224 in Pearl for some reason, but it's more widely available in Diamond. In any case, these can't be classed as version exclusives because Wurmple can be found in the same areas in both games. Outside of the Trophy Garden, the Mime Jr. and Bonsai lines are also version exclusive. Or another super obscure example would be Hoppip being available in Fuego Ironworks in Pearl, but not Diamond, even though it can still be found elsewhere in both games. There are probably more, but by now I'm sure you get the picture. The main story of Diamond and Pearl doesn't really differ much between versions, simply being adapted to fit around the respective cover legendary. Basically, the same stuff takes place, but a different legendary Pokemon is at the center of it all. But that's it for Diamond and Pearl, so let's move on to Platinum. The intro is very similar to that of Diamond and Pearl's, but it shows off new graphics. Instead of just the base forms of the starter lines being shown, all 3 stages can be seen. It also shows off 2 new characters, which we'll take a look at later. The last part of the intro now shows Cyrus, and a zooming in shot of Giratina at Spear Pillar. The title screen again is in the same style as Diamond and Pearl's, but this time features Giratina. The credit sequence is also drastically different, but it still shows the player riding their bike, just at a different angle. Let's get on to changes made to obtainable Pokemon. Platinum was the very first game to introduce an expanded regional Pokedex. This means that there are more Pokemon available during the main story, so a lot of encounter slots were changed. The majority of Pokemon that were made part of the main story were those that were previously given evolutions in Diamond and Pearl, but weren't made part of its regional dex. I'm not going to name them all individually, but examples would include the Togepi, Tangela, and Yanma lines. The other Pokemon that were added would be the Swablu and Houndour lines, as well as Tropius and Absol. And that's it. Well, except for Rotom and Giratina, both of which got new forms. Rotom received 5 new forms, with it inhabiting various appliances, and Giratina was given its origin form, which it can change between using the Grisius Orb. Shaman was also given its Sky form, using the Gardacia as its item to change forms. There were also quite a few Pokemon that were made unobtainable in Platinum, where they could previously be found in either Diamond or Pearl. These Pokemon would be the Murkrow, Misdreavus, Trapinch, Clamperl, Glameow, and Stunky lines. A lot of the Swarm Pokemon were also changed. There's no way that I'm going to name each one individually, but let this list give you a good idea of how Swarm Pokemon differ between the 3 versions. Once the National Dex is obtained, you can now access the 3 legendary birds, which Circle Sinnoh as roaming Pokemon. For some reason, Porygon was removed as an available Pokemon in the Trophy Garden, and was replaced by Ditto. This is likely because you can now obtain Porygon as a gift in Veilstone City. Cynthia will give you a Togepi egg in Hearthome City, in place of the Happiny egg in Diamond and Pearl. Dialga and Palkia can now be obtained in the same game, at Spear Pillar given that the player has their orbs and has spoken to Cynthia's grandmother. Cranidos and Shieldon are technically both available in Platinum, but you still only get one. But which one you get is now determined by your trainer ID. Manaphy can't be obtained without an event, but it can be seen in the Pokedex now by looking at a book in the Pokemon Mansion. Bebe's Eevee is also now obtainable during the main story. As for graphics, again, there is a lot to cover. All Generation 4 Pokemon, as well as some others, received new front sprites and animations. Some Pokemon back sprites were also given updated animations. Once again, the protagonists were redesigned, as well as the rival. They were given new outfits suited to a colder climate, and the changes can be seen in all of the relevant sprites. Special trainers such as Cynthia, gym leaders, and your rival received updated sprites and animations, and VS sprites were added. Some move animations were also updated, such as the animation for Razor Leaf. The location headers were all completely redesigned, and a ton of new borders were added. The poke edge was redesigned as well as the HP bar when seen in Battle. The PAL pad has had its design changed, as well as the diploma, and the screen used when connecting to Wi-Fi now features Pachirisu and Pikachu. The Battle menu's design was also updated. Like in Emerald, a lot of the areas received tiny design changes. Teeny tiny things like trees, patches of grass, fences, and other random elements. Like in the previous video, I'll go through a small portion of the areas that received major changes. Even aside from small things like fences being redesigned, some parts of the Sinnoh region look different, to represent the difference in climate in comparison to Diamond and Pearl. Platinum has a much colder climate, hence the character redesigns, and some areas now have little patches of snow added. But anyway, some examples would include the arrangement of flowers in Floroma Town changing, Spear Pillar having a lot of its pillars moved around, and Lost Tower being changed to look a lot creepier, and now has fog on the higher levels. Acuity Lakefront was changed, and now Lake Acuity can't even be accessed without the use of rock climb. The rooms of the Elite Four have also been redesigned to reflect their typings a little better, and Cynthia's room also saw a complete change too. But those are just a few examples of areas that simply had their aesthetics changed. Now we're gonna look at areas that had new features added, and new areas that can only be accessed in Platinum. The first of which would be Jubilife City, which now has a completely different color scheme from what it had in Diamond and Pearl. The Global Trade Station was replaced by the Global Terminal, which still serves the same purpose, but has a lot more added features, like being able to look at random people's PC boxes online, and being able to upload and view battles using the VS Recorder. A new key item also introduced in Platinum. Another new area that made use of Wi-Fi would be the Wi-Fi Plaza, where you could play cool minigames, interact with other players, and ride floats, among other things. But unfortunately, we lost access to the Wi-Fi Plaza when the Wi-Fi service for the DS was shut off in 2014. The Great Marsh was also completely redesigned. It works similarly to the Great Marsh of Diamond and Pearl, but the Pokemon that you can find there are different in Platinum, as it introduced some Pokemon that were added to Platinum's regional decks. Some of the changing Pokemon, both pre- and post-national decks, were also altered. The resort area also looks a lot more like an actual resort, with actual palm trees, and there's the addition of the villa, which you can furnish. Important characters like gym leaders will also come to visit you from time to time. In Platinum, the resort area is also home to the pond that has Magikarp varying from levels 1 to 100. But of course, the main new attraction for Sinnoh would be the Battle Frontier, which works similarly to the area of the same name in Generation 3. This time there are only 5 facilities, being the Battle Tower, Factory, Arcade, Castle, and Hall. Each facility has a Frontier Brain like in Emerald. The Frontier Brains are Tower Tycoon Palmer, Factory Head Thornton, Arcade Star Dahlia, Castle Valet Darach, and Hall Matron Argenta. If you beat a Frontier Brain once, you get a silver print, whereas if you beat them twice, you get a gold print. I say silver and gold, but the only differences between the two prints is that one has more color than the other. Again, you earn battle points, or BP, by winning battles. BP can be exchanged for various battle items and TMs. You can now also buy Pokemon scratch cards, which cost 1 BP each to try. Amity Square also received huge aesthetic changes. The little caves now serve as warp points, and you're able to walk with more Pokemon than in Diamond and Pearl. Pastoria City also received this face board. There's also a chance that a Krogunk will appear when you use it and then walk off into the marsh. The department store of Veilstone City received a basement, where puffins, berries, and lava cookies can be bought. But I feel like it's time to move on to some new event-only locations. Special caves were added in various locations throughout Sinnoh. They may not seem like much at first, but when you have an event Regigigas in the party, the rooms change, and allow you to encounter the 3 Regis. Also related to this, the Regigigas that you encounter in Snow Point Temple is now at level 1. Probably the least threatening legendary Pokemon battle you'll ever have. Event items were distributed for Platinum over Wi-Fi, being Oak's Letter and the Member Card. These allow you access to Flower Paradise to catch Shaman, and Full Moon Island to catch Darkrai. Data for these events does exist in Diamond and Pearl, but they were only ever made available in Platinum. The Secret Key was also released for Platinum, which grants access to this room in Team Galactic's Eterna building. Inside this room are appliances that allow Rotom to change forms. Speaking of the Team Galactic buildings, both the Eterna and Veilstone buildings had their layouts completely changed. But back on track, the Azure Flute remained unreleased in both versions, so it's not possible to actually catch an Arceus without cheating. But of course, the most significant new area would be the Distortion World. But before we describe this area in detail, it would be best to take a look at the changes made to the main story. Cyrus's goals are a little clearer than in Diamond and Pearl, but still a little bit odd. In Diamond and Pearl, he straight up just wants to destroy the world and begin a new one. But in Platinum, it seems that his actions are driven by his desire to destroy Spirit? It's bizarre, but I swear I'm not making it up. The rest of the game plays through similarly to Diamond and Pearl, with an extra Cyrus battle thrown in Celestic Town for good measure, and you also encounter him right at the beginning of the game in Lake Verity. The main climax of the story still happens at Spear Pillar, but this time Cyrus is attempting to use both Palkia and Dialga to achieve his plans. But right at the last moment, Giratina appears from the Distortion World and saves the day. Cyrus is sucked into the portal and you have to go chasing after him. The Distortion World is a place where no Pokemon can be encountered except for Giratina. The rules of physics don't apply here, hence why water is flowing at all types of silly angles, and you can walk at impossible angles too. After exploring this new place, it's time for the final Cyrus battle, after which you must calm down Giratina. Cyrus remains in the Distortion World, vowing to someday create a world without Spirit. There were also a few other changes and additions made to the storyline too, so let's go through them. There's another Team Galactic admin, being Charon. It's revealed through a couple of old notebooks that Charon was actually the person who first discovered that Rotom is able to inhabit various appliances. Another character, Looker, was added, who so far has appeared in every generation since. Looker is an international police officer. His goal is to prevent Team Galactic from accomplishing their goals and bringing chaos to the Sinnoh region. But that's about it for storyline changes. As was expected, a lot of trainers had their teams changed, and new trainers were added to areas too. This same change is also true for gym leaders in the Elite Four, all of which also had their teams changed. A few gyms also received a completely different layout to those used in Diamond and Pearl. A new area named the Battleground is also available in the Survival area, and is where you can now go to rematch gym leaders, and battle against the SAT trainers too. The Survival area is now also where the after-game rival battles have been moved to, but there seem to be just a few more teeny tiny changes that we need to cover before wrapping up. Firstly, the mystery gift theme was changed from this point onward. In Diamond and Pearl, it was a redone version of the theme from Fire and Leaf Green, but in Platinum, it was changed to a completely new theme. The way you receive your starter is also different. Instead of being attacked by Pokemon at Lake Verity and being forced to choose one, Professor Rowan offers you one on Route 201. This is then followed by a new rival battle right after you receive your starter. The order of some of the gym leaders was changed, and you can now enter a double battle with your rival against Volkner and Flint in the fight area. Some trainers also send out Pokemon with ball seals attached, and any Pokemon that originated from a foreign language game will unlock its Pokédex entry in that language. The level up movesets of some Pokemon were altered, as well as the way some moves work. The way you obtain HM04 and HM05 is also different. In Pastoria City, the way you get the Macho Brace is different. Previously, you had to have all three Burmy forms, but now you only have to have a male and female Combee. Also, in areas where you could find pre-evolved forms of the Pokemon found there in Diamond and Pearl, they would be at much lower levels, but in Platinum they would change to the same levels as the surrounding Pokemon. And there's just one last thing to talk about. A common complaint about Diamond and Pearl is that in comparison to previous games, they're incredibly slow. And while Platinum still runs at 30 frames per second, a lot of elements were sped up so that it's less noticeable. A good example of this would be the speed of surfing. Just look at the difference. But I feel like that's just about all there is for version differences in Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. If you're interested in this series, I would really appreciate it if you left a like on the video, as it lets me know how many people actually want to see another video. To elaborate on what I said previously regarding remakes, I've come to a decision. I'd like to cover remakes in this series, but only after I've covered the main games of each generation. So it'll be a while before I get back to Fire and Leaf Green, sorry. The next video in this series, surprisingly enough, will probably be covering Sun and Moon. It may seem out of order, but with the excitement of a new game, I'm hardly going to want to focus on Gens 5 and 6 with such an overload of exciting new information just at my fingertips. It may seem like a while away, but I do have other videos planned. And in all honesty, I've been working insanely hard on these version differences videos lately, and I kinda need a break, seeing as I am gonna be going away for a few weeks anyway. But anyway, I feel like I've rambled on enough. If you haven't seen the other videos in this series, then I would really appreciate it if you check them out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!